Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's presentation on the Economics of Recycling 2.0. My name is Karen Judkins, and I'm an AmeriCorps member serving with Conservation Nebraska's Common Ground program. Conservation Nebraska's mission is to protect our state's natural legacy by educating the public, supporting communities, and increasing civic engagement, which we accomplish through locally led education efforts and community engagement projects to address local conservation concerns. Before tonight's speaker, there are a few housekeeping things to go over. Your cameras will remain off and you will be muted throughout the presentation. Please type any questions you have in the chat or the Q&A section, and we will answer those at some point during or after the presentation. This will be recorded and will be uploaded to Conservation Nebraska's YouTube page within the next couple of weeks. If you miss any of today's presentation, would like to revisit any part, or share it with others, you will be able to find it there. Following the presentation, we will have a very brief survey that should only take less than a minute to complete. This survey helps support programming like this one, so we appreciate you taking the time to fill those out. If anyone in attendance is interested in speaking with a Conservation Nebraska member regarding conservation issues in Nebraska, or to find out more about what we do, I will put our email in the chat. Sam will put our email in the chat. Tonight, we welcome back Dale Gubbels, founder and former president, CEO, and director of business development of Firstar Fiber Recycling. He is going to update and expand on his presentation from last year about the economics of recycling here in Nebraska. I will let him take it away.
Thank you, Karen. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone again. It's such a nice night and nice day. I'm pleased that people would turn out for this, and I applaud Karen and Sam for all the work they've done to pull this together. As Karen mentioned, I did speak last year on the economics of recycling, and I thought it makes sense to bring up to speed on some of the things because this is a dynamic industry. There are times when from one day to the next, I question whether or not we're making progress, and then other days I think, oh my goodness, this is moving fast. So this effort, we hear a lot about how the world is something we have to save, right? That it's our duty to save the earth. Well, unfortunately, I think it's probably one of the most common myths about recycling. In fact, the truth is we need to do it to save ourselves. The world that we inhabit, has been around for 4.5 billion years. We've only been here for less than 3 million, something like that. I think the earth can figure out how to get along without us. But I think we need to figure out how to prevent that from happening, because this is just a remarkable thing that we're able to live on a planet such as our Earth. So I'm going to focus most of my talk on one of the fastest changing aspects of recycling, and that is the ever-present, always everywhere plastics, ubiquitous plastics. In fact, this picture on the screen, this is a plastics that we get at our recycling facility. And you might find this hard to believe, but people are discouraged from putting this into their recycling bin. These are oversized plastics that are not listed anywhere on the city's website, but they are recyclable, and we are pulling those off. We set it up so that we can handle this, and actually we don't discourage it at all. I'm pleased, frankly, that we're getting so much. But most people and most of the um, communication about recycling is focusing on just the plastic segment. And the plastic segment itself is a huge part of what we get. And in fact, the state of Nebraska is finishing up a solid waste um, characterization study that they did here recently of all the landfills, or 8 of the landfills. I don't think they did all the landfills in the state to get a better handle on what are we throwing away now. And packaging, and when you think about packaging, think about even some of the things in this picture really was a package at some point, a barrel, a tub, a kitty litter bucket. But 30% is the estimate that is going into landfills is actually coming from packaging. In other words, it's not even what one might think is the product that you've used. It's just a package that it was delivered in. And of that, again, plastic packaging is a huge part of it. It's a huge part of it now. And the estimate is by 2050, what is currently about 425 million metric tons of plastic is going to grow to over 500 million. And beyond that, by 2060, the estimate is we're going to be generating about 1 million metric tons of plastics per year. Now, I haven't seen the conclusion of the state's waste characterization study, but the one that they did back in 2008 showed that plastics represented just under 20% then. I will be putting bets out that when the results come out this time around, it's going to be definitely over 20%. Because in the last 15 years or so, we have seen more and more packaging on our grocery shelves and everywhere. They've moved over to a plastic material. And quite honestly, that's not too surprising either, because the companies that are sending their products to us have found that plastics make a lot of sense for them. Plastics are lightweight, and when you're shipping product across the country, you want to lower your freight cost as much as possible. And on average, be it our shoes, be it our groceries, our cereal boxes, whatever, on average, they say that the products we get have traveled 1,500 miles from where it started to where it actually ends up in our homes. That's a long way. And consequently, these brands are struggling to figure out how to reduce the amount of plastics that they use. And in fact, a plastic designer that I've met told me, and we were talking about how can we reduce the amount of plastics or how can we recycle them. They're very genuine. They want to accomplish that. But as he said, my entire career was based on designing a package that would keep food safe, that would be not spoil, and it would be attractive. And then overnight, I'm expected now to come up with a solution to make that same package recyclable. And by the way, on top of that, I'm told I can't add any more price to it because people won't buy the package or the product if it's going to cost more. So you can kind of see his dilemma, and that is what is happening now in a much bigger way. We're members, actually, we've been asked to join a group of various brand companies who make up the US Plastic Pack. This is an organization that was formed about 6 years ago with the idea that this problem of plastics in the environment, we had to tackle it as a collaborative effort. So they reached out to us specifically to see if we would join with them and other recyclers like Firstar Fiber. We're very happy to do that because the whole idea of recycling, what I found, is really new to these brands. You wouldn't think that, other than, this is how this country has always worked. We don't think about things going into it or coming out of it. That's always after the fact, right? We're very slow that way to grasp the consequences of things that we decide to do. Just this last week, I was on a call sponsored by the US Plastic Pack, and they started off with and I told the executive director, this was very timely because I wanted to do a bit of a recap, if you will, on the talk of last year, Economics 101. Well, she laid it out very forcefully for the members of the US Plastic Pack. And the vast majority of these folks, you name a brand, they're likely already members of this group. And they're all struggling to figure out, how do we make our package recyclable? So it was very apropos that Crystal would have this as our first slide. And the one that I will talk a little bit more about in Economics 202 goes back to this supply and demand, which is at the top of the list. Every business is devoted to, they won't make it unless there's demand for it, right? Because that's how economics work. You don't make a whole bunch of widgets and have to sit on them for a long period of time. You also want to do it on a scale that makes sense. It's got to be enough of it so that it is worth the investments that you're going to make, and as well as the profit. And that has been one of the struggles. Most of these brands have been under the impression that recyclers, like my company, we will be more than happy to collect all their packaging and keep it for them. And they forgot, where does it go? There's got to be a market for this stuff. And it's like, wow, we didn't think of that, because everyone buys our cereal box, everyone buys our candy. We've never had to worry about there not being an end market for this. Well, that's all the difference in our world, that you can't just collect material. You can't just process the material. It's got to go somewhere. And that's been the drum I have been beating for these brands to get a better handle on what they need to do. The other thing, which I was very pleased that Crystal put this in her slide, externalities will be forgotten, not captured without policy intervention. Well, what does that mean? Well, what's an externality? Think about it. If you live next to a landfill, you've got garbage trucks driving past your house out on Bennington Road daily. And those trucks, sometimes, I know even the recycling trucks, when they leave our property, sometimes there's stuff that falls out. On the way to the landfill, you can bet there's stuff falling out. And with the wind in this state, those neighbors are being impacted by that landfill. That's an economic externality. Who's paying for that? Actually, no one. Although the landfill operators, if they're a good operator, they'll go out every once in a while and they'll try to pick that up and clean it up. And, I'm not trying to say that they don't, but those people have justification too to think, why should we take this on for ourselves? We're doing the entire society's favors. This is something that the US Plastic Pact has really talked about it in a big way, because not only that, landfill, but the plastics again. How many people have heard of the Cancer Alley in Louisiana? I know I hadn't until a couple of years ago when the US Plastic Pact sponsored a tour of this stretch of highway down in Louisiana that is lined with petroleum refineries all up and down this stretch of Louisiana. It also has some of the highest cancer rates in the country. That's an externality. Although if you're a parent in that general area, you probably think about it much more deeply than it's an externality. We don't make this part of our planning, how to deal with those externalities. And the US Plastic Pact, again, has been trying to get the brands to realize these are concerns that are legitimate, and we need to do things about those as well. So going back to Economics 202, and I say these are lessons provided by nature. These three things here are things that I've come to understand in my career in recycling. The first thing is, in nature, there is no such thing as waste. I'd challenge anyone to go find something that is in nature that could be considered waste. It just isn't there. Well, why is that? Well, I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But the other thing is, constant change is the only constant in the environment and in our world. It's always changing. That's why I say Mother Nature, I think, is probably thinking, great, I'm glad to see those signs out there to save me, but guess what? I'd like you guys to work on saving yourselves. And one of the things that is also prevalent in nature is, if you study ecology at all, and I tried to make that a bit of my efforts in recycling, because I see a lot of connections. In a habitat that's healthy, you find that there is constant connections between all the species within that habitat. And when they get off for other reasons or for whatever reasons, often the disruption is humans again. But we've also see that when those disruptions are dealt with, nature has a way of restoring its habitat again. The oops, maybe that's right. So using plastics again as our primary focus here tonight, there's three questions that we need to ask ourselves about how we deal with plastics. And one of the first ones that comes to mind is, why are solutions so hard to come by? And I hear that not just from the brands, but from everyone who's connected in recycling in some way. Why can't you recycle this? Why is this so hard? Because, and here's a funny story. When I started out in recycling years and years ago, I was just out of college. and a friend of mine at a national conference about 3 or 4 years after we were in it, both of us were lamenting the fact that we're still in recycling. It's such an easy thing to do. We should have solved this one 3 years ago and I could have moved on to something else, but we didn't. And now, almost 50 years later, I'm still dealing with some of the same issues. But another question, and this gets to the heart of really why is it tough? Who pays for it? Who pays for where plastic goes at the end of its useful life? Um, a little pun here. The short answer is the last person holding the bag. Um, and that is true. That's usually the municipalities or the local government that in some way is dealing with it. In Omaha, as maybe many of you know, you might think recycling and trash is free because no one's ever sent you a bill. That's because it's in your general fund. Taxes are paying for the collection and they're paying me, my company, to deal with the recyclables, and they're paying the landfill to take it as well. That's all part of how it's being done. So, yeah, in many ways, the residents, citizens of Omaha are holding the bag to pay for this. We also know that plastic comes from oil, and it comes from refining oil. So the question that I keep posing to these brands, why is it that the petroleum industry that you're buying resin from hasn't really done a whole lot to help you solve that problem that you're being saddled with? And this is some interesting facts. For every barrel of oil that is drilled, 4 to 8% of it is going to be turned into plastics. In fact, until it was turned into plastic, they would just flame it off. It was considered a waste. When someone came up with the bright idea that that stuff it's a carbon, maybe it could be made into something, by golly, it is a very good resource. They made it into plastics. That's great. It's also a bane on our existence now because 20% now is expected to be what all petroleum is going to end up making. 20% of it is going to go into plastics. That's why those numbers I said earlier about packaging are going to go up and up and up. So what is Mother Nature's approach to dealing with this? Well, I think there are some lessons that we can learn from good old nature. To this first question, why are they so hard to come by? If we take a page out of natural world, we'll realize that we need to be patient. We need, as a species, to evolve because every species in a habitat might just tell you that this lack of waste didn't happen overnight. Whenever there was an exchange of carbon, exchange of whatever, there was another species that came along and I think there's something here that I can get into. And who pays for it at the end of its life? Well, again, in the natural world, it's cooperation. And the Wood Wide Web is something that I learned about a few years ago, that the forestry industry has some very smart scientists who came to understand that in a natural forest, fungi are communicating with all the trees and vice versa. They're actually sending nutrients to one another. If there's an unhealthy tree, they will cooperate and figure out what does that tree need? Well, it needs more phosphorus or whatever. And a healthy forest has this communication system going on constantly, which begs the question, if they've evolved to that level in our world of economics, can we do the same? Again, I'll go back to the US Plastic Pact. The whole idea behind getting these brands to work with little old recycler like myself to figure out how to solve this problem, that's a very good step in the right direction. As far as this other question about, why isn't the industry doing more for being responsible for all the plastics that they're making? If you ask nature, I think it would say, don't look at us. We used to put that stuff and bury it. And that's, of course, a very honest answer, because was organics that were buried in the earth, millions of years ago. But I think we could still come up with some answers. Society is teachable, and I'm very optimistic we can solve these problems. One of the ideas that came out of Europe that's been adopted in Canada and now is being adopted here in the US is this thing called the Extended Producer Responsibility legislation. What that means is that corporations, the brands who are members of the pact, they are in fact being told they need to organize a collective and pay for the recovery of their packaging. And it's not just the packaging, it's in some states, it goes so far as it includes the paper that you produce. You got to help the municipalities that are bearing this responsibility and this cost since, we landed on Plymouth Rock. You need to also start paying for your contribution to make this come about. Nebraska is in a situation where our neighbors are starting to pass such legislation. Colorado first, about 4 years ago. They're just now getting it set up where the brands, if you sell into Colorado packaging of any type or paper, based on how much you're selling into it, you're responsible to join a group. It's called the Circular Action Alliance. And that group now is taking that money. And if you're a municipality in Colorado and you've been paying for your recycling program, you can turn the bill over to them and they'll pay for it. Now, I'll talk about this a little bit more later on, because I do feel pretty strongly that it's a good start, but we got ways to go. Now, it's not just packaging. Actually, last year, Nebraska became one of only about 3 states so far that have passed an extended producer responsibility law specifically targeting plastics, lithium batteries. Lithium batteries are, a wonderful product. I bet everyone, and in fact, it just occurred to me that I'll bet this mic that I'm holding probably has a lithium battery in it. We have become enamored with the fact that we can carry around our cell phones, our laptops, probably even drive our cars with a lithium battery. What becomes of them when they actually wear out? Nebraska, again, was one of the handful of states that has now mandated that that industry has to come up with a solution to deal with that problem. And my goodness, it is a problem. When people just throw those batteries away and they get damaged in a recycling truck or in a garbage truck, they get damaged. If there's water or liquids, it will start a fire. Our operation has had several over the last several years where it's a significant problem. And I'm told by our trash hauler customers that very few of them can go a month without having a fire in their garbage truck. So this law, this bill was a long time coming, but it's there now. I believe it doesn't kick in until next January, but already that industry is organizing to figure out how it's going to set up collection depots for batteries. It's well appreciated by my industry that we could have that. Now, I'd like to see others come up with it for the other packaging and other materials. Minnesota has also followed Colorado now, and they passed an EPR bill. And it's great, but remember back to what I said about supply and demand. One of my concerns about EPR is that their major focus is still on getting it collected. Well, when it's going to be collected all the way around us in much greater numbers, what few markets that we have here in Nebraska, we're going to be dealing with that problem. So what more needs to be done? Well, these bills generally have what's called equal modulation policies embedded in them. And really what they really are just incentives to help the brands understand that basics of economics, they need to be doing more, such as helping to create end markets. And unfortunately, we haven't seen a whole lot of effort on that part yet, because it goes back to my other comment. This is a very challenging problem to deal with. A lot of folks would like to see a plastic bottle that I showed in the beginning of this presentation. It should go back into a plastic bottle again. That's a great idea. But there's a lot of concerns. What if that plastic bottle had been, someone put, they were going to recycle it, but, I got to drain my car's oil first and I had to put it somewhere. And when I take that back and I emptied it, I'm going to throw that in the recycling bin. There's a lot of issues that go into this bottle to bottle or package to package. And the industry still hasn't solved all those. They can't expect the homeowner to always remember that, when you recycle, it's got to go back into something other than the bottle. So there's lots of potential challenges that go along with that. But these EPR bills are starting to add things like, you make some investments into answer these questions, and you don't have to pay as much in to the fund. It's that incentive that is going to take a while to evolve to where we get a system that is going to be more responsible to deal with this problem. And so this, again, is where nature and that whole idea that if fungi can figure out how to do it, why can't we? I think we can, and I believe we will be doing it. But this leads to what is truly nature's if you think about it from an economic point of view, it's established a circular economy. A circular economy meaning that everyone within a habitat plays a role in making sure that there is no waste because, they figure out how to deal with the discards of others. That is something that I think we can do and do well. And this leads us to the choice that we have for our society in terms of the type of economic system we want. One that's a total reliance on fossil fuels. And frankly, that's what we have now. Because think about the landfill again. I mentioned that Nebraska is doing this study on landfills. We're in our small state, we're putting 2 million tons of material into the landfills every year. Of that, based on that one study that was done back in 2008, 400,000 tons of it is plastic. So looking at that alone, that's a lot of effort being put on petroleum that we haven't figured out how to use that petroleum-based product in a better way. But it's not just that, it's also the other 1.6 million tons. How did it get to the landfill? Oh, how did it get to your home? I mentioned earlier, everything that we get on average probably has already gone 1,500 miles, all driven by petroleum-based fossil fuels. So that total reliance on fossil fuels is a big part of how we live. That's where our throwaway society really can trace its roots back to, because, it's make it go away, just make it go away. That's been our claim and our mantra for years. Planned obsolescence, how long will this mic work? I have no idea, but I bet someone figured it out how long it's supposed to work. And then we have prioritized landfills. When I started out in this industry, this state had every town of less than 5,000 could do one thing with their solid waste, and no one ever said anything. They had a match, they'd pile it in the nearest ravine, and they'd light that sucker up. It wasn't until 1992 that we decided that we had to close all those. The federal government had told us to do it back in 1976. It takes us a while to get around to things. But what we did next was we created the sanitary landfill, and that became the priority of how we dealt with solid waste. There's also a provision in there, though, that we will also recycle, and the state set some very high goals that by this time of our life, we should have reached about 10, 15 years ago. Of that 2 million tons that I said is going to landfill, there'd only be 1 million tons there because we were going to recycle 50% of everything that went to a landfill. That hasn't happened. One reason for that, we never had in that legislation any solid way to pay for any of this. It was all up to the communities to figure out how to deal with it. And if you've lived in Omaha, you know that we didn't even get recycling carts until just a few years ago. And it was rather inconvenient, frankly, until a few years ago to recycle. Now we have the carts, it's a lot better. How do we move forward from this? How do we transition to a circular economy? Well, EPA defines it as keeping materials and products in circulation for as long as possible. It's a nice goal, and I think there's a lot of potential. But to do that, we have to rethink a lot of our responsibilities and our approach. It's got to be shared among all the players. Again, not just the municipalities, not just companies that are set up like mine to try to process this material. It's got to be going back to the ones who are actually creating it. And then those externalities need to be acknowledged and dealt with, because until we do, some of us are bearing the cost of our wasteful society more than others. And if we're acknowledging that and helping them deal with that, what we're paying in will be more costly, but it's also cost does have the potential to create innovation. And I've seen it time and again in my industry and in others as well. Lastly, and I learned of this just a few weeks ago, I didn't realize that Senator McCain, John McCain, tried to get a bill through Congress years ago called the extraction fee, which basically, if you're going to drill for oil, if you're going to mine for minerals, if you're going to harvest trees, we want you to help figure out where it's going to go after that. They're called extraction fees. And right now with Nebraska struggling with the fact that the budget was a real nightmare for them to balance this year. Think of this when we talk about things like there's a company that's looking to put mining down in southeast Nebraska for heavy metals. I would love to see us talk to those companies about, hey, you've figured out how to mine and process this material. How about another bit of incentives that they become one of the outlets for lithium batteries? So we don't have to ship it 1,500 miles somewhere else. We create jobs and we do it right here in our state. That's all part of a circular economy approach to things. One of the last pitches I'll make concerns my own company. Plastic lumber is something that we're turning some of these otherwise hard to recycle materials into. We're shredding it, melting it, and making plastic lumber out of it. I chose this particular slide of our boards because these actually were boards that we made from plastic fish nets that folks in Hawaii sent to us in the hopes that we could figure out how to recycle those into something. Now, this was just a one-time only project because they would rather do it in their own state, but we felt strong enough about helping them that we made these boards for them. And the zoo, Henry Doyley Zoo, is going to take these boards and working with local kids, high schools, we hope to turn them into a display and other things that they'll use there in the school, in the zoo. Now, here's the real clincher on this. You might wonder, well, where did these fish nets come from? Well, folks, there's a group in Hawaii that volunteers have been pulling it out of the ocean. And then they're also working with fishermen who find them. They're not their nets, though. These are actually nets that they have discovered have come from as far away as Asia. And a lot of the Chinese fishing outfits, when they have a tear in their fish net, they cut it and they let it go, and it's ending up in Hawaii along the shore. So the point being that transitioning to a circular economy whereby we find out how to use materials for local uses. And these folks, in a way, they're trying to raise the money to buy a machine to replicate what we've done, and more power to them, because it's not an easy thing to do. But that's the type of circular economy that I think innovation can drive that type of behavior. So I'm going to leave you with what nature, again, its choice is the circular economy. Its choice is to do away with waste. And in fact, it occurred to me a few years ago that the way nature looks at waste, it's a resource. It's always a resource. But it's not always immediately becoming a resource, because they're a resource waiting for alternative, sensible thinking to emerge. I think we, as the species that likes to pride ourselves as being top of the food chain, we can come up with ways to make this part of our lives as well. With that, thank you, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dale. That was very interesting. So we're gonna launch a survey before we start some questions, both in just a moment, we'll launch it online. And Laura's gonna pass out the surveys for those in person. So we're gonna give people a few minutes. Actually, I'm gonna help Laura pass out some surveys too. Okay. So we're going to start with the Zoom questions for now, and then we'll field some in person. All right. All right, Dale. Ryan is wondering about some research indicates that discourse around recycling as a solution is actually increasing the amount of plastic waste produced rather than reducing it.
I've not seen that research, and I use that term just because that's how you said it. But I would love to see it, because I believe it's probably more perception than it is reality. And I say that because over the years, people have misinterpreted a lot of things. In fact, when the city of Omaha went to single stream collection and used really garbage trucks, we were getting calls all the time saying, well, obviously you're just sending it to a landfill. Well, I know that there are end markets for what we do send out of Omaha and what we are making. So I know that it is being recycled, but I would like to see how that study did their research, what their parameters were, because I don't disagree that some people might think that, well, by recycling, all I'm doing is increasing the dependence on plastics. I can't do anything about that other than to say that it's going to happen regardless, because again, I go back to, if right now 4 to 8% and soon to be 20% of any petroleum company that is drilling for oil, they need outlets for that 4 to 20%. They're going to continue to find uses for plastics in ways that boggles the mind. Anything we can do to change that, let's look at that before we're worried about whether or not people are getting the wrong perception about plastic recycling.
Okay. Desiree is wondering, is your end product also recyclable?
It is. Yeah, our plastic lumber, we can grind it up and put it right back into our plastic lumber. And in fact, we tell people who buy our lumber, if you got scraps, bring it back to us. We'd love to get it recycled. So.
All right. Dale, could you identify some current markets for plastic collected for recycling?
Sure. I mentioned at the start that water bottles and soda bottles, they are being, there are end markets where they're putting it back into bottles again. Carpets are another source of an outlet for our plastic bottles. And also uh, 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 t-shirts and other clothing. But there are all types of plastics you probably are familiar with that they coded 1 through 7 plastics, with 7 just being anything. The 7s are what we are turning into plastic lumber. But the ones, which is the bottles again, are going back to bottles. 2, high density polyethylene, that's going into a variety of products. And one of the things that I've been telling the brands is you need to ship your products on pallets. We send a lot of our plastic pellets to a plastic pallet manufacturer that was using virgin high density, and we got them to use a percentage of our material in their pallets. So there's a lot of uses that are out there. I suspect this chair I'm sitting in could be a use for a recycled plastic. We gotta drive more innovation to find more uses such as that.
Okay, awesome. Zoom folks, you're about 70% done that poll. Thank you so much. If the other 30% could just answer those questions, we would really, really appreciate it. I'm gonna go to the room. Is there anyone who?
Okay, now you have, you were saying that you make your own plastic boards. I'm gonna go. Okay, so you say that you make your own plastic boards. Well, what is the difference between just an all plastic board and like composite boards that they make decking? Or I've actually also seen where they're making houses, the foundations out of some kind of a plastic composite.
That's a very good question. The difference between our plastic and composite plastic, that composite means that it's a mixture of wood flour and plastic mixed together to make it lighter than what our lumber is. And they also put a coating of PVC plastic on the surface, which we don't do. Ours is 100% recycled plastic, which also allows us to recycle it again at some point. It's heavier, but it's also, in my mind anyway, can be just as attractive as the others. We're not trying to compete though with those. Our belief is there's more than enough construction that could be using plastic lumber. So.
Is there, do we know if recycled plastic like your lumber continues to leach microplastics into the environment?
That's a very good question.
Around that?
Sure. That's a very good question. I wish I knew the answer to it. I really do. I don't. And again, that's another thing that we would like help identifying, that we need the industries themselves to help us with that. It is a concern. I know the US Plastic Pack has brought it up at meetings before as well. And there's just not enough money going into studying this type of thing. It's a very good question, though. Thank you.
I have a question about, until the batteries have the appropriate way to be disposed of, what's the most responsible way that we can dispose of batteries just as, everyday people? For example, like finding vapes on the ground, or when this microphone does need to be disposed of, what should we do until then?
Sure. I understand that there are some outlets already. Under the sink is taking some of the lithium batteries. You can take it back to them. It's my understanding that even some of the battery stores are also starting to work with people that take it with the expectation that they'll eventually have to do it anyway.
I also know that some of your hardware stores will have recyclables for, not just everyday batteries, but for like lithium rechargeable batteries. They have drop off points. And then they ship it to whoever they, is in charge of that.
That's the case right now?
Pardon?
That's the case right now?
I think you're right.
Oh, okay, the comment was, our hardware stores, you can drop off batteries and they will ship it to where they need to go. Thank you. Anyone else have a question? Anyone?
The screen back up with work.
Oh, with
Information, so I can.
sure.
Yes.
Not.
We have, yeah.
It's DGUBBELS.
I can write it down.
Yeah, we'll get it back up. That's
Yeah, I can flip back up.
Or what's your company, or what's?
Firstar Fiber is our,
Fiber?
yeah, it's FIRSTARFIBER.com. There you go. Cool.
Are there any?
I actually had a question. So you mentioned the US Plastic Pact. Is there a global version of that pact?
That's a very good question. Yes, there are. I don't remember the exact number anymore, but the packs have been developed thanks to the work that Ellen McCarthy did. She's a pretty famous woman who sailed around the world, and she brought attention to the plastics in the ocean. So these packs were her idea. And Canada has one, Mexico has one, and a lot of other countries too have packs. And we are working in conjunction with a lot of them as well.
And it looks like there's a few more online.
Okay. So this person's wondering about skepticism with the hefty orange bags going to where they're supposed to be going. And this is particularly related to the great efforts that people go through to clean them. They want to make sure it's going where it's supposed to.
Sure. I can't speak for anyone other than ourselves. The city of Omaha, I don't know where your friend recycles, but I can assure you when it comes to us, it is being dealt with properly, making lumber. We're also working to try to expand that, and we've reached out to some other companies, as I mentioned, the pallet manufacturer, we're trying to find others like that who can use this material rather than virgin resin.
Okay, was there?
Oh, yeah.
Are there any particular plastics that we should not send to you?
That's a very good question. The one that we really do not want is PVC, which I believe, now I have to remember what number that is. I think it's 3. Yeah, I believe it's 3. Thankfully, there's less and less of it, but PVC has polychlorinate in it. And I just don't want to expose our plant, our employees to it, because that will fume and put off gases that in large quantities. And there are folks who recycle that. We actually had taken vinyl siding, which is a PVC as well, and shipped it to Pennsylvania where they were recycling it. But it's just too costly. And going back to my definition of waste, we got to wait for more sensible alternatives and thinking before we try to recycle any more of it.
For those of us who
Here,
live in apartments, for those of us who live in apartments and don't have the carts, do you have drop-off locations?
Yeah, there are locations around town.
Yes, there are locations for drop off. I believe there are 5 anyway. And we have one on our property at 108th and I Street, but I know that there are others around this city too.
Would they be on the website?
I believe they're on our website, but they're definitely on the city's waistline website.
And just to follow up on that, just to confirm that in Lincoln, if you, do you want to talk about Lincoln?
Yeah, in Lincoln, there are several drop-off sites posted around the city for all the recyclables that you said it's current.
So then that just means you can put the orange bag in with the regular plastic bin.
Yes.
I wonder if there's any recommendations on where styrofoam can be recycled if we can.
Yes. I'm sorry, Karen. Yeah, I believe Plastilite has a drop off at their facility in North, up by 680, the interstate, that will accept it there. You can also put it in your orange hefty bag as well. But if you have a lot of it, I would recommend going there to Plastilite, because they make that stuff and have figured out how to use it.
Plastilite only accepts the hard styrofoam though.
Yep.
Not the soft styrofoam.
Soft styrofoam.
So if you can bend it and it doesn't snap, that's soft, needs to go into the orange bag.
Start in place.
Right.
It won't take.
No.
No, but if it snaps on your knee, then it can go to Plastilite.
Start with the rulers and stuff, yeah.
Any other,
Yeah.
any other questions?
The orange happy bags, will they go in recycling bin? Okay, there you go.
Yes.
All right. I understand that the Omaha Orange Bag Program can handle a few more types of items than other cities. For example, the silver lined bag. Can you please talk about the difference?
Yes, silver lined bags are actually very recyclable here in Omaha because we we're getting those in our recycling stream already. And we had no way to recycle those. So we insisted when we set up this program that we had to have end markets that could handle it. And we also spent close to a year and a half going around the country and even into Canada to find technology that we could use that. Now, in other parts of the country where they've got this program, I understand that they did not have an end market that could tolerate those types of bags, which is unfortunate because we told them, you know, you should not publicize that you can't because more and more of us will be able to figure out how to do it. But they put it on their flyer, the Hefty program did. It's unfortunate, but we can't control others.
True statement. So we did have someone send a helpful comment about batteries. For battery collection sites, you can go to batterynetwork.org. Thank you. And there was that it?
And then
And then also the omaharecyclingguide.org. You can go to that website and find out if you can recycle it and where you can do that. So, okay, well, if we don't have any more questions.
Is there a cheaper alternative to the hefty orange bags?
The question is there a cheaper alternative to the hefty orange bag? They can hear you.
Oh, okay. There is. I don't encourage it though, because, but I don't discourage it either. Just take a regular, well, actually, no. Our guys and gals are trained to pull off the orange bags. And the reason we do that, sadly, we have found people will too often put actually garbage in bags. And there's nothing like ruining your day to take a bag and break it open and find it full of chicken guts, which I've done before. So
But Hefty's the only company that makes them?
they are. We have been trying to encourage Hefty to reach out to its competitors and work with them because we think this program would go a lot farther and a lot.
Because they're very expensive.
but as long as the bag is orange, is that kind of,
We'll probably pull it out, yes, if you can find an orange bag. But you know, your newspaper comes in a orange bag, a small one. We get in about 150 tons a day of material that we separate both mechanically and opticals and magnetic, but also manually. And you just can't find people who can stand on a sort line all day long and pull out everything that, so we try to limit that. And the bags are larger. You can get hundreds and hundreds of other plastics in at one bag, and it's going to weigh less than 2 pounds. So that's why we encourage people to, you know, and what I also tell people, I understand if you can't afford those bags, my next ask is don't just throw plastics in loose, because again, we're trying to pull this out manually and you can't pull out, you know, 200 candy wrapper bags, no matter who you are. And it becomes a contaminant for our paper and everything else, because it's got to be separated by commodity type for us to be able to move it to someone who can use it.
So do you sort the orange bags? So when we send in the orange bag,
No, we don't go through them. They just
Okay.
go right into, yeah.
Dale, just to clarify, so what you're saying is if you don't have an orange bag, your candy wrappers and styrofoam and whatnot, put them in the trash
Put 'em in the
instead of
trash.
just your recycling.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sadly.
sadly. Anything else? Okay.
Sorry, I'm always full of questions. Has there ever been an effort to maybe partner with the landfills to sort materials as they arrive?
It's a good question, but we collaborate with them when they pull out cardboard or other things that they have found that they know to be recycled. Not every landfill, we've got one in particular that does a very good job of pulling things out for us. But even that is going to be limited for a lot of reasons. If it's in a garbage truck, it's going to be contaminated with other materials. So when this particular landfill that we work with, it's mostly their commercial customers where they have accumulated large amounts of plastics. Farmers, for example, are these grain bags that they use to store corn in. That's a big chunk of plastics that there's actually a company in Arkansas that is specializing in getting that type of stuff to make back into plastic bags.
somebody just made the comment about passing out the orange bags at Earth Day, the Earth Day events.
Yeah, yes, we probably will be passing them out there, both in Lincoln and in Omaha, and I believe in Bellevue.
Stock up on. Well, if there are no more questions, that concludes our webinar. If you haven't gotten a chance to fill out the survey that was launched, I will reiterate how we would greatly appreciate it if you took the time to fill it out. We also want to mention that there will be a tour of the Firstar Fiber Recycling facility that will happen on Saturday, April 11th at 10 a.m. Please see our Conservation Nebraska's Facebook page for more information and to register for the event. Or if you're in person, we can register you tonight, right now. If you want to share this with someone who wasn't able to attend tonight, or if you want to watch it again, this webinar will be posted on our YouTube page in the near future with all of our past webinars. Thank you very much for attending and supporting local conservation efforts. Most importantly, thank you to Dale Gubbels for this presentation and for sharing your time and talent. Have a great rest of your night. Thank you.